Spectrovision Radio.
While our government's official position is not to speculate on this subject, we can choose to let our minds explore other possibilities, to use our imaginations. For if we consider that astroscientists agree on one point, that the possibility of life elsewhere is not only quite probable, some feel it is there without a doubt. Let us suppose then that these objects are real space vehicles, extraterrestrial in origin, and not an illusion of the mind.
I'm Ryan Sprague, and you are now somewhere in the skies. All right, welcome to Somewhere in the Skies, and we have been talking off air for almost 11 minutes now, and that is not surprising because I feel like when we have Chrissy Newton on the show, we could talk forever. It's been so long since she's been on the show. We have so much to catch up on, so much she's been doing, one of the busiest people in the UFO field. And joining us is our wonderful moderator, Suzanne, today to help with this interview. So, Chrissy, welcome back to Somewhere in the Skies.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see you. I know I'm like, Ryan, I miss you. Suzanne, I met you last year, so I miss you too. But I have not seen Ryan or talked to Ryan and like even on a show, and it feels like a while.
So, yeah, officially. We're always like texting back and forth when something happens in the UFO world. And you were busy.
You're like
during
home, Ryan. You're like you feel like home. Yeah.
It's like so those sweet chocolate chip cookies you smell when you come in the door, right? That's what I want to be known as. Chrissy. That's what I want to be known as. Well, for those who may not know who you are, Chrissy, I don't know how that's possible if you follow the UFO topic.
I don't know about that, but
but there's always new people getting involved with this stuff. So, Suzanne, I'm going to let you start this one off since Chrissy and I have been friends forever. You guys just recently met, so I'm sure you want to know some of the origin story and stuff. So I'll let you sort of lead here with the opening, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thanks. Chrissy, you're so sweet to do this for us today. And I know you have been climbing internet mountains on your end, trying to get things to work. So we appreciate the extra effort.
Thanks. Yeah, technology has not been my friend this week. And I actually laughed because see this cord right here?
Yes.
It broke. So I know, and it connects to my computer, and I was like, "Are you joking me today?" And so then I had a backup, thankfully, but I was like, "This is like 30 minutes before I'm supposed to do a podcast." Like,
always.
So it's been my week, right? So let's just hope it ends. Like today's Sunday, so let's just hope the bad luck ends.
Yeah, the internet gods are with us today, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I have some questions for you. And one of them is I'd love for you to tell our listeners what you did before or besides UFOs.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I've really loved UFOs since I was a little girl. So I've always been around it since I've been like 6 or 7. My dad had UFO experience, and that's really what brought me into it. He showed me a picture, and I just like, it was one of the most amazing things I remember thinking and was like, what is this? And like was so captivated by it. And then just throughout my entire life, he's always asked like questions about what he saw. And so trying to figure it out. And he's deeply interested in history. My mom is too. And along with like neurology. And so a lot of the things like you do, like your parents, they do really rub off on you as you get older. Sure. And we are in the same DNA, right? So there would be some common interests from nurture versus like nature. But before getting into like maybe the more front facing side and working with the Debrief, I was working in public relations. I still do now, more media, like kind of like 50-50, I'd say, but working in public relations, working in entertainment, lifestyle, pretty much anything, consumer brands. I've worked in fintech, I've worked in finance, all in the PR space. The only thing I have not done is done government relations. And I might do that one day if I ever feel that I align, which I never really do. I don't really follow left and right. I think it's just made up. So I find that it's just one of those things that I don't like in that way of politics. I try to stay away from separating and division personally, but outside of it, if I ever did find a candidate that I really did believe that, was going to do something, because I live in Toronto, for Canadians, then I would go into political side of public relations. But right now it's just, UFOs, media, edge science, brain computer interfaces has been on my radar immensely. I'm actually going to a brain computer face conference next week. So I'm excited to get involved in that world, because like they all intersect with UAP at one point. Like it really does with this topic. So, and just edge science in general. So it's just been a real ride, I guess, my entire life.
That's awesome. And I think all those little nooks and crannies of life that you're in, they contribute in a bigger way to what you do with UFOs. All those life experiences matter as you bring it to your podcast and to these interviews.
Oh yeah, for sure they do. And I just a different way of I love people. Like I really do, I don't like being around people all the time. Not one of those people, but I do really like people, and I like people's stories, and I like talking with people and connecting with people. And that's just, it's something I enjoy doing in real life. It's hard when you're like, you're out and there's maybe lots of people at times, but I do like a great one-on-one connection and spending time with people and hearing their stories. So that's why I'm here. And also selfishly on my podcast, I get to learn when I'm talking to different academics. I ask questions from what I think my listener or my watcher on YouTube would like to hear, but then I'm also asking questions that I'm deeply interested in. And it's kind of like going to school in a weird way. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's, and that's why I do it so much, because I do enjoy that. I enjoy the learning aspect of it.
Me too. It's one of the best things about helping Ryan with his show is getting you to read it all and actually putting that knowledge to use instead of just absorbing it and sitting quietly with it. So I get it. I have another quick question about your dad's experience, though. What year was his experience? And could you tell us just briefly what he saw or what he experienced?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I was 1987 or 88. He's not exactly sure on which year. And to be honest, I have talked to someone about researching my case for my dad, and I can look at different media in Pembroke, Ontario, which is about, I believe, 2 hours to an hour and a half north of Toronto. So he was just driving up there with a group of people, and they were going to a cottage. And what he ended up doing was seeing with a whole bunch of people in the car, a full car, I think it was 5 of them, a UFO in the distance. So they started like chasing after it and following it. And when they got closer to it, it was hovering above a telephone pole light. That's how close they were to where like the lights are from the road. And you can imagine back in the day, those light poles, which are still out in Pembroke, Ontario, I bet you, on that highway, depending, I think it was off the 401. They're potentially still there. So they were really small. They weren't as big as highway lights now. So he saw a very small disc-shaped UFO that was metallic hovering above it. And so what he ended up doing was he flashed his taillights, like flashed its lights at its high beams at the UAP, and it flashed back.
Oh, wow.
And I know, it's wild. And so,
Wow.
it is really wild. And so what ended up happening, and there's some new developments actually on the story that I'll tell that I thought was really interesting, that a producer actually brought up to me that has worked with CBC. But then what he did was he took a picture of it. And so my dad showed me that picture when I was a kid, and we still have the negative that he has in it, in the safe. And so I've been asking him to give it to me so I have his other documents that he has of other stuff that's UAP related, but I want that because I want to blow it up and make it an art piece. But when I was a little girl, he showed me that. And I remember thinking like, what is this? And trying to understand it and get a better grasp of it. But he always said to me in those documents that he has now, in the photo, he was just like, you're too young, Chrissy. Like you won't understand until you get older. And so now I'm older.
Trying hard to understand
Trying hard to still understand it. Yeah, exactly. Nothing's changed as much. Maybe I've gotten a little bit more idea of what it was. But my dad said that it was interesting because the correlations of Bob Lazar, which, if you believe Bob Lazar's story or not, but the one correlation is that it was the size. My dad said little kids could fit in it. So it was small. he said. He also said that it was metallic in shape. It was like a nuts and bolts craft. But my fault. The biggest part of the story, though, actually, is because we see like the some of these observables, is what they had a rifle in the back of the car because they were hunting, and they took it out and they pointed the rifle at the UAP to look through it at the scope, like to get a better, closer look, and it took off.
Oh,
So they watched it instantly accelerate. Yeah. So I know, it's unbelievable. So now, with this said, I was sitting with a producer that works with a production company in Canada this summer, and he was asking me the same story. How did I get involved in UFOs? And he was like, where was it? And I said, it was like, just by Pembroke area. And he's like, that there's a military base up there. And I went, no way. I said, I didn't know that. He goes, yeah, there's this whole road too that all this weird stuff ends up happening on that's like unusual in Ontario. And I was like, what? I was like, hold on. Why have I not heard about this yet? And so I can look at like different media clippings, because apparently my dad said the UFO, days later, there was like sightings of UAP similar in different regions in Ontario. So he remembers that. And so I can look at the media. I can look at the media clippings back there. I know that David Marler actually has NICAP files back from then, that time from the 1980s. So I can go to and look at David Marler's, like there's so many through the NICAP files, but I can go through that. But then I can just go through media clippings and then look at the activity might have been happening on that base. So here's the thing. What my dad saw, and which we've always debated, it could have been tech. It could have been advanced tech, because we know, and I was told this by someone who has worked formerly at Area 51, told me off the record on a podcast that they were developing like drones at that time. So that technology was already going, which most people would be like, no way, that's impossible. It wasn't. He told me they were actually working on that technology in the 50s and the 60s. Right. So if you believe him or not, if you believe this person or not, but the parallels that it potentially could have been an advanced technology drone that came off this base that was related to American and Canadian tech, high possibility. So when I found that out, I was like, gosh, I got to go look into this more. So that is something is on my bucket list. And there's a couple of things for my father, because he has a very interesting background from growing up, and he has his own little mysteries. So, he does. He's got a couple family mysteries in there. So it's just, there's that one. And I've got another family mystery one day I have to unravel.
So in another 20, 30 years from now, you'll get another answer to one of these.
Exactly. Well, and there's things that you can, like, now we can FOIA, and there's obviously a whole bunch of stuff that you can do, but it's so much work taking the time to do it. And I will at one point. UAP, I said I'll start now, and then another story with my dad I will probably go look at to his family background, and FOIA more for that. And and he's been trying to answer these questions his whole life too, and he was doing what I was doing around this age as well, with trying to figure out family stuff and just other scenarios. So it's kind of like, what's next, right? The next generation. And it's my family generation too, so my sister would want to know all of our relatives. So
right.
Just a long way of explaining that.
Well,
no, I love it.
Exactly. I understand how that got you started, though. What a fascinating thing to have experienced.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also love to know what prompted your start with writing for the Debrief or working on Rebelliously Curious. How did you make that step, a full step forward, a concrete step forward for those?
Well, Ryan's part of the story.
Oh, is
he? Yes, he is. Yeah.
I monkey wrenched my way in there. So
yeah, right. Well, not you didn't. I wrenched my way in there.
Oh, fair enough.
Better way of saying it, I think.
We're both too polite. Yeah.
Fair. No, but what ended up happening was I met Ryan. I reached out to Ryan because I saw what he was doing, and I was like, this is amazing what you're doing. I love your show. I love, all the work that you're doing. And I reached out to him because I was like, I want to get involved in this, really. And then I think it might have been a couple months after I met Ryan, like online, the Debrief, Tim McMillan came out with his Go Fast story and like the rest of these other stories. And I was like, what? Like, who are these people? I was like, who are these this group. And I work in public relations. So I was like, and I read so many UFO outlets. I'm like, I would think I would know who they are. So I, did a little spy, looking them up. Who is all these people? What is everyone doing? And I saw that Ryan was contributing, and I was like, reached out to Ryan. I was like, can you connect me to them? And then what ended up happening is Ryan said, yeah, they'd be open to chat with you. And by that time, MJ Banias, which is funny because I was just texting him before we got on here, MJ Banias was like, Chrissy, I reached out to him and said, hey, I would love to do some video work, because they were looking for writers and people to do stuff for the debrief. And he got back to me. We had a phone call. And then the short of it is I ended up in a Discord chat with all of us. And that's how it all started. And then later on, just was doing public relations with them, and then podcasting, and then writing, and then also doing public relations. So I became a partner shortly after. And now 5 years later, I think we're going in our 6th year, which is like...
Oof. Wow.
I know. I don't know how we all haven't killed each other yet.
I know, right? Yeah.
Sometimes like, we are like family, and very, in many ways we are. Yes. It's
a dysfunctional family, but a family.
Yes, it can be. At times it can be very functional, and times very dysfunctional.
And no, you guys are not CIA assets, as many people out there think.
Well, I'm not.
Conspiracies at the door, guys.
Exactly, I'm not. And
you're not.
You don't know about everybody else.
That up.
I'm not smart enough, so it ain't me.
Well, I wouldn't say that, Ryan. That's what a CIA asset would say.
That's true. Good point.
That's funny. Well, I have one more question for you, Chrissy. Yeah. I love your interview with Richard Dolan. And you guys talked about the disinformation campaigns that went on historically. First of all, what was it like interviewing him? And then sort of a backup question is, what do you look for in your work that might signal that disinformation is going on?
So I had
Richard
Doty, right?
I'm sorry, Richard Doty. Like, what did I say?
I'm like, disinformation. That sounds more like a Doty thing.
What did I? Yeah, I don't know who I asked about. Richard Doty is who I'm asking about.
Yes, Doty. I have been so deeply interested in this story for so long. I'm friends with Greg Bishop, who wrote Project Beta. I'm very close with Greg Bishop. He's such a dear friend and like such a great human. Like he really is. And he really wants to be able to find out the truth of this. And he really cares about Paul and others. And so for me, it started me on this road now that I've been going down. It's about how the government has affected civilians, right? And this is, Paul Benowitz is not the only one. We have Agent Orange. We have there's so many. We have MK Ultra, obviously, and there were so many offshoots of MK Ultra that ended up affecting multiple different people and civilians. And we have even eugenic programs that started in the early 30s. It doesn't end. And the question is, what's happening today, right? And so with Richard, with Richard Doty, it was one of those moments where I think for me, my perspective changed with Doty in the interview too, because I grilled him a little hard off the hop, and I will say that. And I was probably maybe a tad bit, I won't use the word emotional because I hate using that word with women because it's just so stupid. We're all emotional people. But I think I'm so committed into what happened to Paul Benowitz is that you do forget, and this is not sympathy for Doty because I know I still believe he had a choice to do what he did. He didn't have to do it. He could have left. But there are elements in there being like a 25-year-old man. This is his first job, his first gig, not really understanding the ins and outs. I remember literally thinking yesterday about something when I was 25 and the stupid decisions I made in life and didn't realize my own cause and effect. So I think Richard Doty has seen that, and there's a growing. So I do have not sympathy, but I do have understanding of where he was coming from. But I still do deeply believe that he had a choice. When I was 25, I wasn't working on. I don't know if I would have chose to do a disinformation campaign, but I think that he was heavily influenced by the American government, and he says that he was told to do this, and so that he didn't choose to do it personally. He chose to assign to do it, and he really did say that he cared about Paul Benowitz, but. The questions I ask him is, he's like, well, we were taking care of him and his health. And I said, well, yeah, his physical health, but not his mental health. I'm like, if anything, we all knew that he had more mental health issues than he had physical health issues. So it's, why would you play on that? Right. And take advantage of that. And so those are things that I learned from Doty and have grown to maybe understand him a little bit better as a person and why that ended up happening. But there's still a lot of questions of, was Paul Benowitz maybe a target of an MK Ultra aspect, because there was multiple letter agencies attacking him. It wasn't just one. And, Doty saying that the government knew at that, or not the government, the president knew at that point. I'm forgetting what president that was. Was it Reagan? Would have known at that point. Yeah. I think maybe. And I'm like, I think, it was Reagan in the 80s, would have known at that point and was briefed allegedly. So there's so many things that you potentially could go down these roads to find out more of who was also affecting Paul, why, because it's a bigger story. The bigger story is that civilians are getting affected, and the American government doesn't care, and they use them as casualties. Exactly. And that really bugs me a lot. And so I've been kind of working on that now for the past little bit, looking into it, talking to people, and hopefully working on a larger project around that as well in the next little, because I think it's important that, that should not happen.
It should not.
Like zero. Like there's a lot of things that the government does that is corrupt, and there's lots of things, but targeting your own civilians through science programs or science experiments unwillingly and unknowingly, or just in general, is just is ultimately horrible. It changes that person's life, but it changes their whole family's lives, and it affects so many people, especially and then it can affect thousands or millions if you're doing it on a larger scale.
Right. And we watched it unfold in real time with Kevin Day. I worry about that guy to this day. I think he finally has his bearings, but I think we watched in real time that happened to him as well.
Yeah. It's happened to so many. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that there are so many, and I have talked to someone that was a victim as a child. In this year, I spoke to that person. So I'm finding more people, and if anybody has been, please reach out to me. And vetting this is not easy. It's not the easiest thing to do, right, because it's hard to find, and it's not saying that there are people that lie. There's people that lie in general, right, about everything. So vetting it is hard, and also finding documentation can be troubling as well, right? But they're out there. The whole fact that there are so many cases. There's like more than 10 cases that we have now where people have been tested on from like the early 30s that are government actual programs that we can find documentation to. So again, the question is, what is happening now, and what has happened in the early 2000s too, right? That we don't know. Yeah. Yeah. It's 25 years, a long time. And you could be a child and now you're a 25, 30-year-old adult.
Right. Well, and then that all bleeds into, I think, some of the quote unquote whistleblowers we're seeing come forward today. Like, is this also part of disinformation, which I want to touch on with you in a little bit here, Chrissy. But I want to fast forward a little bit because I know our time is limited. I had some more questions about guests from Rebelliously Curious, but guys, just go subscribe, go watch, go listen, do it right now. Stop this, go subscribe. You've had some incredible guests on the show. But I do want to touch on this new endeavor that you're doing podcast wise, and that's with Bryce Zabel. You're now doing a show called Project Book Club. So awesome. So awesome. So tell us a little about what that is, if you don't mind, and what books you guys have covered so far.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So Bryce said to me, he just sent me a message and he was like, Chrissy, I have this idea for a podcast, but it's also something where, we can keep up with UAP history. He's like, do you want to do a book club? And I was like, yes. I'm like, I'm always wanting to read UFO books, but sometimes it's hard to get things in the mix. So you read them like once in a while. I'm reading maybe like 3 a year instead of like maybe I should be reading 1 a month. And so, right, or 4 a year, depending on,
I've read like 2 of these on my shelf. That's it. You're right. There's not enough time.
And I have so many books at my place because I have them and I'm like, oh, I'm going to read this. And then I end up reading some of it and then I don't finish it. And so I was just like, you know what? It's so hard to do that. And Bryce was just like, same with me. That's the challenge. He's like, why don't we make ourselves accountable, but then we can podcast about it. And I was like, that is fantastic. So he started Project Book Club, and now that's he asked me to co-host with him. And so every single month we read very different books, and I pick one, then he picks one. We are reading Mirage Men this time. The first book next month, that's when we're starting to read right now. The first book we read was Encounters, and then we did Lou Elizondo's book, and Imminent. And then we read War, which was Tom DeLonge's third book that just came out this year of his trilogy. Then we read Above Black was our last, or just our most recent one. So the podcast only started this year. And so Above Black was our last podcast. And I recommended that we read that book. And then, now our next one's Mirage Men. So if you want to, like, and we'll be doing, what's it called? Twitter chats as well, or Twitter spaces, I believe they call them. We'll be doing that. I hosted one last month, and Astral is an amazing producer. He's a good friend as well. And he's on Twitter, and he's always hosting those spaces with us. So we can talk about the book. Sometimes we obviously get into like the nitty gritty of UFO politics at times, but the idea is to have a place where people can discuss the book and talk about it.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. I got to ask, like, maybe not one you covered or even plan on covering, but do you have like a personal favorite UFO book, a definitive book, or one you like keep reopening and going back to? And any favorites?
I have Project Beta. I love Greg. I love how Greg Bishop writes. I'm so happy he's a friend of mine, because I really do love the book so much. And I would recommend Project Beta all the way. Encounters actually was a really great book too, Ralph Blumenthal's. It was really well done. I enjoyed how Ralph writes. There's historical aspects. To be honest, every book we've read this month so far these months so far have been really, really great, I find. But some of them can be like really heavy. Like Tom DeLonge, like War Book is like 600 pages or more. So reading out of the month is hard when you're busy, but we did it. And at the same time, you're like, I ended up going down so many different roads because of Tom DeLonge. And I appreciate him for that, because I literally had to stop the book sometimes. And then I would go read about Jack Parsons. And then I got obsessed with Jack Parsons for I don't know, a good 3 weeks while I was reading the book and watching documentaries on him. And then slowly really had a crush on Jack Parsons. But just found it fascinating, and then got really deeply interested in the turn of the century again, and what was going on in the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and NASA, and then what was happening around the occult side of things and how those intersected. So it was just, there's been so many times you read these books, and this is the UFO world, that it brings you into so many other different worlds and so many different countercultures or subcultures, I should say. And then you just find yourself hanging out there. So that's what that book did to me. And same with the Above Black. It made me think the same thing I'm doing now about, this is the same idea about Dan Sherman says that he was affected by a government program, and he was targeted by one at a very early age, extremely early age, and was working with the American government and as a whistleblower, as an undercover, not knowing that until later on in the book that it was related to aliens, but that's his whistleblower story. And that's an old one as well. It's not so new, but the question is like, do you believe Dan? And now we're living in the era of whistleblowers. So I don't know, there's a lot to unpack in the book club. So
that's good. Like, that could vindicate some of the stuff he brought forward a really long time ago. Yeah, I remember when that book first came out, and people were like, what? Come on. And now a lot of what he's saying is lining up with stuff, but then some of it isn't. It's interesting.
It is. And the psi stuff, though, the psi abilities that he says he's able to have in that book is actually lining up with today more than ever. Like, it lines up with the past as well, because psi has always been, the psychic abilities or talent of communication or telepathy has always been connected to UAP, but it's just so much more integrated now into UAP in the mainstream. And like, they're having the psi games and all these other kind of offshoots, obviously the telepathy tapes. So what he's saying there is not far off. And I've also heard from other people that have had negative experience, that being a form of drugged to be able to do things that are related to UAP technology in government is something that has happened. And he says that he had to take a form of an oral drug before that he could actually have these abilities. And it was probably to open up some type of neural pathways for him in his brain so that he could, or shut down certain receptors in his brain. Because that's what happens when you take ayahuasca or other types of hallucinogenics. It shuts down those receptors so that you're able to then be a little bit open to other receptors out there in your consciousness or whatever might be happening. That's what they say in a neurological perspective. So what he's saying is not, there's a couple things where you're like, whoa, but then there's a lot of other elements where you're trying to, you can't fact check. And you're also like, wow, and if it's the full on the truth, we live in a really scary world, scarier than we think it is.
Yeah. Scary, weird world for sure.
And sad. Very sad.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, I definitely guys subscribe to Project Book Club as well. This is like one giant promotion for literally everything cool that Chrissy's doing. The next cool thing that you did, Suzanne and I are actually within hours going to be interviewing David Marler as well about the National UFO Reporting Historical Center. And you had the opportunity to go to like the literal ribbon cutting, like the opening of this thing, if I'm remembering correctly. So yeah, tell us a little about that experience, what it was like.
I love David Marler so much.
He's awesome.
He's such an amazing human. So he asked me to go and he was like, do you want to come down? And I said, 100% I'll fly down to do this. So I did a little YouTube. People can go on my Instagram or or on YouTube to see the video that I did just around like the record center and what was happening in the launch and the documents that they have. But it was unbelievable. You have so many documents, the most documents in North America that we know that are UAP related. And it was funny because Amy was there from, I forgot, UFO Morning. I forget her handle that she has, but Amy was there and she lives in Albuquerque. And so I've met Amy before in New Mexico and she came up to me and she's like, Chrissy, because she lives in that community. And she's just like, hey, and I wrote an article about the launch of it, and she said the best line, and I was like, I love it so much. She points to the building and she goes, the truth's not out there. The truth's in there. And I started laughing and I was like, Amy, I'm using that in an article. And I said, but you're so true. I'm like, tell me, okay, show me if UFOs are real. Just point to the record center. Mm-hmm. That's really what David Marler created, was a place that houses all of these documents that have so much evidence and so many stories that have happened to people from all across North America and around the world, but a lot within North America. And he has so many different records from NICAP. There were early 80s from the Lorenzens. He's got so much, and he still has more coming in his intake. He hasn't even processed everything. So I'll watch your podcast when you talk to him next to see where he's at and all the new stuff that he's getting. Cause it's exciting. And someone who likes artifacts, I'm like, ooh, it was really emotional. I actually almost cried. It was getting pretty emotional when I was in there. When I was like, I can't believe this. It's so exciting. And this is the first version of it, and he will do a second. He will grow this to be something bigger. So it's just the infancy, and it's something that I'm very proud of David Marler for doing it, because people say a lot of things, but they don't do a lot of things here. They say a lot in the UAP space, and he's actually doing, and it's lovely to see. And he's a man of his word, that's for sure.
He is a doer, yeah. And, a lot of people don't realize, you can go there and look at the physical files and the artifacts and the things he's collected. He's also tangentially digitizing everything, which is even more important, because I can't tell you how many people David and I have talked about who had these files in their garage and there was a flood and they all got destroyed. Can you imagine the UFO files out there, whether it's from Project Blue Book, Grudge, Sign, QFOs, all of these different things throughout the country and the world at this point that he's collecting. So a lot of them just get shoved into a back corner or they get destroyed. David is collecting it all and then digitizing it so that we'll always have it, which is important too. So I'm so jealous you got to see it in its infancy stages and what it is inevitably going to become, which I think, like you said, will be the most important place for any UFO researcher in the world to travel to. You know,
Yeah.
by Roswell, by Area 51. Like, this will be the bucket list mecca for UFO people. I think it already is, to be
Yeah,
completely
you can do the tour. Like you could go to Roswell, then go to or start in Albuquerque, then drive out to
good point.
Roswell. Like you could do a whole curated tour with that. And then
Yep.
you could spend weeks, months in the record center, like
Yeah.
looking through things. I remember I pulled out a cassette where it was, I believe it was a cassette, or maybe it was one of the different types of recordings on audio, but an older one. But it was with Hynek, sorry, Paul, his father, Hynek speaking about Travis Walton and what he thought about the case. And I was like, I gotta listen to this. Like,
Wow.
I want to hear what he has to say, right? I'm like, it's because it's such an interesting perspective, especially how much Hynek was involved with Project Blue Book. And, it's just, and as a scientist on his own end, and a researcher, and to see what he thought from that perspective to Travis Walton. I've never heard what he's thought. I don't know if anyone else has, but I haven't. So I'd be curious to see what he thought about Travis Walton and his take on it. So there's so many of that golden nuggets in there that you would have. It's a treasure trove of content, and it's unbelievable. And David Marler is just brilliant for keeping it. And I'm so happy he's digitizing it. But I also said to him, like, you've got the hard copies. Never get rid of the hard copies.
Nothing like, feeling those crusty files with coffee stains on them and smell them. It's just like any good old book,
Yes.
It's history. It's UFO history. I love it. Well, to bring things more current, Chrissy, Suzanne and I have some questions about the UAP hearing, the UAPDA, things like that. So you reported on the latest UAP hearing on News Nation, like right after it happened. So what were your takeaways from the most recent one? This is our third one now, and we did a whole debrief on it. Forgive the pun. Debrief. It will not be the last time the debrief comes up in this conversation, but yeah. What did you make of the UAP hearing that just took place? The Somewhere in the Skies podcast is free to listen to every week, but if you would like to help support the show, we have a very active Patreon page where you give what you think the show is worth. In return, you'll get early access to the main show, bonus episodes, and priority to ask our guests your listener questions. Your support truly makes the show continue and grow. So, to learn more and to join, visit patreon.com/somewhereskies.
Yeah, I think the MQ-9 drone, like the Hellfire missile, like I think that obviously was the biggest footage that we've seen coming out of government directly from Congress. So I think that was a moment where we all went, whoa, the UAP didn't even budge. Like you saw a little bit of debris come off it, but it really didn't do anything to it from what we're seeing. You would imagine it would demolish, like it would just shatter it, but it didn't. And so obviously that is the biggest takeaway, I think, when it comes for footage. But the other things I thought were really interesting when I was listening to George Knapp, he's so eloquent and he did such a fabulous job as a journalist. And you see how much he deeply cares about it, about the topic. And him talking about Russia for me was really important. The idea of how long, and we've known this, that Russia has been looking since, World War II and during the USSR, how they were deeply interested in UAP, and they have been looking into the technology, and they might know more about the technology than obviously we do, or just as much as North America does. And so that question, right now, I think is really prevalent within the relationships of America right now and President Trump and his relationships with Russia, and also what's happening around the world right now and what Russia might be doing if it potentially will invade Poland, if it hasn't already, and where those things are going to go. So the reason why I say that is that if Russia understands that in our relationships between North America and Russia and this advanced technology, and if President Trump has been briefed on this, it's a big concern, right? And where the world might go and how we're sharing technology and information if we have not already. So I was really proud that, I'm so proud. And that was probably one of the reasons I would imagine I like to talk to George Knapp about that, why he put that forward. And I think that was maybe one of the reasons why. But besides that, I think there were so many. We had obviously like people that are actively working right now. We have not had that. We've had people that have worked within government or have been have served, but not in like presently serving. So that was a first for us. We have an active, someone actively in combat right now, and so I think that there's so many moments where you're like, this was really great, and for me, it's like the Super Bowl. I've like UAP, right? I call it game day, right? Because it's like so fun. But it is moving things forward still slowly, but they're moving things forward. The one thing I noticed too is a lot of the congressmen and women, there wasn't a lot of people there from that side.
Yeah, it was pretty empty.
It was pretty light. Yeah, it was pretty light. And I was sad about that for sure, because, let's be honest, there's a lot of other issues going on in the world that are really important that need to be attended to now. But this is an important issue as well. So you would hope that there would be a few more bodies in the space to be able to take this seriously. And the reason why I say that is that it doesn't mean they're not taking it seriously. It just shows that they might not be, right? That's what it kind of looks like from my perspective. But yeah, there were so many of those nuggets. I should ask you guys, what did you find to be the most relevant within the hearing?
I mean, we talked a lot about NAP and the whole Russia thing, which I thought was really interesting. But I think, and I don't want to speak for you, Suzanne, but we did talk a majority afterwards about Dylan Borland, the actual federal whistleblower who, came forward and said he has witnessed the programs, program, as it were, that has retrieved these things, or at least has spoken to those individuals who have, a la like Grush said too. But his story about the triangle over Langley Air Force Base, he was so nervous testifying. Like, it just, from a human level, he really stood out to me as like the reluctant whistleblower to kind of testify at something like this. Because I'm going to be honest, there have been people who have testified at these hearings in the past where I was just like, I've heard this all before. Like, there's nothing new here. You just want attention, sort of thing. But with this hearing in particular, it really struck me. And I'm like, this was a good hearing. This is put together well. The questions are pretty on point. There was a clear goal of like showing the structure of coming forward as a whistleblower, the risks that can be taken, and just showing that these guys can be the example and like empower more whistleblowers to eventually hopefully come forward. That is why we were told there were no first-hand whistleblowers, because they still aren't ready and willing due to the lack of protection. So I don't know, Suzanne, am I missing anything?
No, you're not. I thought Dylan Borland was the jewel of that, but I also loved George Knapp because you got to see who he is. He is a bit of a wild man. You just snatch off the cover page of a Russian classified document and you head home. He's not scared. And I also loved seeing his vast experience on display. Right. Yeah. He does these segmented interviews with people, which are always good. But then I thought in that hearing, we could actually see the benefit of all the historical work he's done. He was a confident speaker and getting it all out there.
There was a moment, though, when Representative Luna stopped him in his tracks and played a video when he was talking about Russia. And I had a moment where I was like, ooh, I don't know if that should have been done, because I was like, that's his time.
That's right.
I was like, that's his time. But she ended up, thankfully, they ended up going back to the topic. And so I think he was able to sum up what he was thinking. But I did have a moment there where I was like, I don't know if that was good moderating.
Yeah.
Personally, because I was like, because I wanted to hear what the rest of he said. And she's like, well, we're going to play the video here, but it wasn't his video. So I think what she must have done was realize that the asset that was supposed to be played was somebody else's, and so she did it, and there was probably a reason why she did it, to make sure it was on the clock as well. That was probably another reason why she knew. She was like, I have to get this in here or it's not going to be on the record, let's say. So that might have been a reason. But I remember stopping because I was like, I want to hear what the rest of George had to say.
Right.
Right. Yeah. I was like, please. Then they circled back to it. One of the other congressmen, I believe, asked a question and circled back to it, and I was like, oh, okay. okay, thank gosh. And then he went, George took that lane like he would as a professional,
Of course.
and went right down there and answered the rest of it. So I think he did a great job. Out of all the journalists, I'm so proud of George Knapp for who's been on. Right now we've only had 3 hearings, but he's brought so much history and so much knowledge and so much passion to the table, and I really respect that of what he did.
He was a popular guy there. I mean, you even had some of the representatives being like, "Oh, I grew up watching this guy or listening to him on Coast to Coast." I loved it. Even one of the other witnesses, Wiggins, the Navy guy, was like, "I grew up watching George Knapp. This is crazy that I'm testifying before Congress about UFOs with him. Like, what a surreal world I would imagine for everyone in that room." Suzanne, did you want to cover the UAPDA stuff? I know that's you've been looking a lot into that.
I have. I've been following this closely, Chrissy. It's my legal background. Makes me just get in the nooks and crannies of this thing, mostly with worries. And I wondered about your thoughts on the proposed UAPDA legislation, particularly the element on eminent domain.
Well, I think I go back and forth with this. And I've asked other people's opinions in the beginning because I was like, I actually don't know to make my own opinion, which maybe sounds weird, but I was like, what is other people thinking? Because I wasn't sure how I felt with it, because intimate domain sometimes is a good thing, right? It can be, but then ultimately, right, it can be, if we wouldn't have like certain roads and certain socialist things, at least within Canada, if we didn't have a form of eminent domain, right, we wouldn't have the structure and infrastructure that we have. So that's where I was like, oh, but then I'm like, I'm not into this finders keepers thing, in as well. So I think I still go back and forth with it. I think that intimate domain and the government owning UAP, no, because we can't FOIA it. Obviously, we won't be able to ask specific questions. I think that it's for the people. It really is. But the thing is, intimate domain is supposed to be for the people, but that's not how it will probably work out. And that's the issue with eminent domain. In theory, it would make sense, right? And it should, in the way that it's supposed to operate, I believe, from what I know. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but from how it's supposed to operate. But yeah, I don't think that's going to be the case. So you can't have that. We can't give it to the government. We can't, because it won't be for the people. They will probably hide it, or they will protect it to some degree as well. And I'm not for contractors owning it as well. Like I'm not for this. I'm not for Lockheed Martin or larger organizations owning these things or having, it's just, but then the question is who gets to keep these things? And I would imagine it should be the academic community.
Couldn't agree more. And I think our concern about the effectiveness of eminent domain in this particular setting is based on literally decades of black boxing and disinformation. So I think if we were coming at it from a fresher start without this negative baggage, we might feel differently about how eminent domain would work. But I couldn't agree more. I just don't see it ever happening. I don't see, even if it's in the hands of the contractors, them actually handing it over. And a friend of mine who is also a lawyer has been working on a registration act instead of an eminent domain act. And I wondered if you had read anything about that or had thoughts on just having these people register it, not having to turn it over.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never thought about that. Again, like I'm not a lawyer, and I have not looked into that side of things, but registering is actually interesting because it would be registering to own or registering to say that they have the property.
They would just register it. They wouldn't have to turn it over. There's no sort of a step one. What would happen first, identifying it in this registration act. And then we would have to work behind that about what it is and who gets to look at it and who gets to hear about it, those sorts of things. But asking them first just to come clean about what they have would be such a huge step.
Oh, it'd be a massive step, like, again, like George Knapp goes on the record saying Lockheed Martin, has this technology, is like, I just was like,
yes. And he's not alone.
Well, right. And it's, and I've literally, this is the funniest thing, UAP is they say like when you're in this topic, so many things just start to happen that are related to you. People see UFOs or they have different experiences. For mine, it's been a government officials. And so, or people that work with government or have worked in the Air Force. And to be honest, this has happened a lot of my life. A lot of people that work in the Navy, work in the Army, work within government, they fly a lot. Right. And if you're flying in cities that they're flying to, you're end up more likely to be with them on the plane. But I was laughing because when I was flying back from Alabama, and I think I flew in from Dallas, Alabama to Dallas, and then I fly back home, or Chicago or something, I fly back home. But I ended up being on a plane, and no joke, I'm sitting in the window, and all the way to the other side, the person beside me, all the way to the other side, the two other people in the window, I'm writing something probably about UFOs, or I'm writing notes on something related to UFOs. And the guy is obviously eavesdropping on my work. And he looks at me and he's like, "What do you do?" And I said, "Oh," so I explained to him, and he's like, "I work at Lockheed Martin." And I'm like, "Oh, no way." And so he's like, "We all do."
What?
And they're all in the line. I
my
started
God.
laughing and I was like, "Oh, you all do." And I said, "Oh." And so they start chatting.
Question time.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, we work there. And I was going to say who, but they're like, and they were flying to Toronto. And so they were working with what Lockheed Martin is working with government, or other just contractors within Canada. But they said, "We believe that we have reverse engineered, like we work there and we believe that." And I was like, okay. I was like, that's amazing. So we've chatted more about that. I obviously can't say who, but all three of them were like, yes, we do think that's evident. That's true.
Whoa,
That,
what a
like,
coincidence.
That reminds me, like if you ever went to, like, I don't know, a preschool class, and it's like parent day, and you just yell "Mom," and you see how many women like react. I want to like do that in front of a group of Lockheed people and just go tic tac, and then see like if anyone's ears perk
Whose
up.
head turns on a dime.
Yeah.
Right. They're like, what? Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because I've met so many different government officials or people on planes, but also I love talking on a plane. I feel like one show I want to do is not driving in cars and talking and interviewing. Mine's on a plane. Like, what people do you meet on the plane that just sit beside you and you start talking about their life? I've literally flew from England once with another guy, and I think we went through a therapy session for like 5 hours. He was like, "When I was a child," and I was like, we were just talking, but it was like,
Bring
thank
the
you. And I was like,
booze.
exactly, bring the other round around. But it was just one of those things. And I do enjoy it. Planes are like such an interesting place to meet so many wonderful people and interesting people. Right. So,
Yeah.
but yeah. And I
possibly from a
apparently,
UFO.
especially UFOs. Yeah. And UAP related, but government officials, they're out there flying on planes. That's how you bump into them. Outside of this topic. Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, I know our time is limited, so I kind of want to get to all these key points with you, Chrissy, because we've been dying to know Alien Encounters. Now, this is a show that you co-hosted with our good friend Mitch Horowitz, who
Yes.
actually spoke at Anomicon this year, and years past as well. How did this show come to be with Discovery, and yeah, maybe sort of set the scene for us? You have like this kind of like it's one of the few shows to ever try to explain these things. I hate using the word debunk, but like
Yeah.
explain. If you can find a prosaic answer to a UFO, boom, that's amazing. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, how did the show come to be, and were there any cases that really stood out to you when
Yeah.
investigating with Mitch on this show?
For sure. So how it started was somebody asked me and like in the side of seeing my work and said, we'd love for you to audition for this and like just do a call with producers to see if this would fit. Mitch is more, most people follow Mitch Horowitz's work. He comes from the occult side of things, right? That's really what he's a writer. He has been following it for so many years and writing about it. I look at things from obviously more of a science perspective and cultural perspective when I'm doing my writing at the Debrief, and the people that I know, and also the media trends and the things that I've worked in public relations. So I don't do this by myself. I work with a group of people that help me analyze this data, because not one person can do this. It's impossible. You have to have a group of people. So they work with me, and we look to and I think I'm okay with debunk. Skeptic, I'm not good with, because skeptics never really, they only believe what they feel and think, and they never change their opinions. People that debunk they're just trying to show if something's true or not, right? So we are in a way debunking certain things, but then some things we can't debunk when it comes to UAP encounters. And so we're interviewing people that have had different encounters from UAP experiences and just phenomena, different types of phenomena. And we interview them at Roswell, New Mexico, in the Variety, which is one of their local bars, like literally a local hangout, and which is such a cool space to film in and be part of as well, because it's like a local watering hole there. It's been there for so long, and I think it's actually the only bar that doesn't, because to be a bar you have to serve food, serve alcohol, not food. So the only place that doesn't sell food, just alcohol. So it's like legitly a bar. So it's not like a restaurant. It's a bar.
I've had some nights I'd rather forget at that bar, but that's a story for another time. Yeah,
that's fair enough.
I was having some PTSD during your show. I'm not gonna lie, but
really? Oh, and I know, because it can be a rough place. Like, it's not. Yes, it can be a very rough bar. It's not like
Roswell locals. You do not want to mess with those people.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It can be a rough space. So we end up, we're filming there, and yeah, it was 2 weeks of filming, and we talked to like 30 different cases. Not all of them were shown, but majority of them are, though. But the one case that I loved so much was the USO case. It was, you had such credible witnesses. You had both a seaman and his wife, and he lives on the water. He's been on the water for majority of his life, so he understands what he's seeing when it comes to things that are around him when he's like on his boat. And so his partner, he sees a UAP and, above him. I believe he sees it comes out of the water. Don't quote me. It's been a year and a half, so I might miss a few things again from memory. But he sees it comes out of the boat and he starts to film it, but it's a triangle and it's hovering like above him. And so we're watching this video footage. It's unbelievable. But then what ends up happening is that his partner ends up on the coast, sees this over his boat and calls him and is like, what's going on? So you're getting this form of triangulation. And now the Coast Guards have said, I believe they see it, but if it's not the Coast Guards that see it as well, that we look into the Coast Guards and there's nothing that they're doing that is like high, explosions or when it comes to something in the air or flares, there's nothing to that. If anything, they were doing low barge explosions on the water that day, but it didn't correlate with the date and time and location. And so there's so many things that we're seeing here. It's like transmedium, right? And it's just, I believe he watches it move. So we see the instant acceleration. We're just seeing so many of these elements. There is no signs of propulsion. We're seeing so many of these moments of like what we would look at the 5 observables. And I said to him after we were done recording, I was like, can we talk for a minute? And he said, yeah. And I said, I truly, deeply, like after reading all of the analysis, I'm like, you saw something. Like, you for sure saw a USO. Like, it was unbelievable. And it was just such a great story. I wish we captured it a little bit more, because they do talk about it in the show, but I wish it was a primary, a little bit more of a primary story. But it was unbelievable, and he really did, and he was such a great witness, and she was, and you can tell that they weren't lying. They had the video footage, and they're like, we see this stuff all the time. And mind you, I forgot to say, it was in Catalina Island, out of all the
of course,
right, California,
of course.
Right? I forgot to say that, right? So you're getting so much activity and historical activity out there. So it's just, yeah, it was a really great. And I've been meaning, and I keep saying this every time I talk about this case, but to do more about it, because I do want to research it more and write about it just separately as a UFO case, because it's really, really great. And I know a lot of people have asked me about it too when they saw it as well, because they're like, that's an amazing transmedium story. I'm like, I know.
Well, so that's one of the good ones, like the ones where you were able to tell this person like, yo, genuine UAP. But like, there are cases on that show that you found prosaic explanations for. So what was it like breaking hearts? Like,
I don't, Brian, I'm not that person. It's killing me. It killed me inside in many different ways. I called
try to punch you, or like, what happened?
Well, I know. I said that to producers too, because they were like, well, and I'm like, am I going to be protected? And so put it this way, I'm okay. It doesn't feel good telling people something that obviously they don't want to know, right? But here's the thing, I would rather tell somebody that what they saw wasn't a UAP, and be the Simon Cowell of UAPs at that moment, right? So it felt like, because I think it's healthier for people to understand what they saw as something that it wasn't, because me lying to them and telling them what they saw is actually far worse, I think, for people's mental health. And so they might go home and be like, I don't like Chrissy for that. And I might go look it up, but they might also think about it and go, oh, maybe I didn't see that. It doesn't mean UFOs don't exist. It means that it's a very, very small percentage. The longer I've been in this topic, I think it's less than 1% than people see UAP. So I think that's the part that I don't want to feed into someone's either. It is not good if you're able to prove something. It's more important, I think, to be able to talk about that in a safe space and to be able to sort through that data than keep going along believing something that might not be true. I think that's actually worse for you. Again, I am not a psychologist. I wish when people left the show that there was a psychologist there for them to talk to about that, because there's things that are wrapped in with UAP. There's grief that can be wrapped in there. There's trauma that can be wrapped in it. So it's just more than UFOs, right? And that was really hard for me. The show was changing consistently as we were going along. So I didn't know that it was beginning, it was when I was hired, it was just us listening to people's stories and talking about it. And then it came down to where we were analyzing more and then making a verdict. That was something that happened very last minute. So I wasn't really agreed with that, let's just say, when I got into the last moments of it, because I don't think you can show a verdict. So personally, I was probably more of the problem child on set with producers because I wouldn't say yes to things. I would push back and say,
That's good.
Well, right, because I'm I was like, I care about Debbie's mental health down the road, right? And let's remember, this is a TV show as well, right? It's not a documentary. It's a TV show. So you're going to have producers that will conflate certain things. But I did my best to be able to look through the data. And that's why it looks more like a debunking show, because half the time I would not say yes to things if I wasn't pushed to or pushed to say yes. But I would say no, because the data's there. I'm not going to say something Starlink when it's obviously Starlink.
Yeah.
Like, come on. We all have, we have my own reputation. I have to protect in my own work, working in media. So that's also aspect of it. But really, to the greater scheme of it and the greater of their scheme of it, the idea of it is that you want to be able to make sure that Debbie down the street understands how to maybe identify UAP now, which would be great. But she's also has her own experience of known as walks away with better understanding of herself and what she considers to be reality too.
Yeah, you've strengthened the discernment of a UFO witness. And I think that's really important because then, like you said, that 1% of UAP will inevitably happen to someone and there will not be an explanation. And it's good to know that there will be more discerning eyes out there rather than believing everything is alien or interdimensional or just things like that. So yeah, I think that's really important.
Right, and it helps us weed down to, we want to know what is not a UFO so that we can point to what is potentially a UFO. Like, it helps us. So I was trying to explain to producers on set, because they were like, we want all like everything to pretty much be a yes. And I'm like, it doesn't work like that. I said, you have to reverse your thinking. I go, that's not how this thinking, I understand. And it's funny because a friend of mine said this to me when he watched the show recently. He's like, they make you more like a skeptic and you're not, Chrissy. And I said, I know. I said, but the problem is that I'm not going to lie. Like, I don't want to lie. So I have to be able to push back, because it's not right for me to just go, yes, that's not right. Trust me, there's many different influences that happen when you're on a show like that and you're getting pressured in different ways. So some of the other choices I've maybe have made in that show, I wouldn't have said as much, but it's different pressure when you're working with, entertainment in Hollywood and a TV show and multiple producers. So the best thing I can do is try to go forward with, evidence. And so that's why it looks so much more a debunking show, because I don't want to conflate things as much as possible. And there's some things I obviously cannot answer, like none of us could. But when it's like prosaic explanations like Starlink or a satellite, like it's a satellite, it's Starlink.
Well, and there was
Yeah.
enough good, genuine
Oh, it's
UAP that
great
you
data.
guys found. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Suzanne, any last questions on Alien Encounter? I got one Patreon question, and then I promise we'll get you out of here, Chrissy.
I do have a question, Chrissy. I'm such a fan of Mitch and really admire his work as well. But I worry that you are being sort of placed in the continual pocket of being the bad guy. I wonder if you two ever discuss maybe switching roles every once in a while so he can do the hardcore fact checking and he can deliver some bad news as opposed to it just having to be you all the time.
Bad cop, good cop. That's producers
Yeah.
for you. They wouldn't let him.
They
And so,
wouldn't.
get the woman to be the bad guy.
Of course.
Always,
Of
yeah.
course.
But I will say this, I'm actually really proud though that they, at least most of the time when you do shows like this, they put the women in the side that's like the side that's soft, or only asks culture questions and doesn't look at anything from a science perspective. So that narrative has shifted, which was nice, where they put me in a seat where I have more of the academic stuff behind me and the science behind me to be able to make a proper decision. And so that I respect that, because women don't always get those, and UAP shows, they don't always get that position. So I'm happy that I am in that position, and I'm okay with, there's episodes I do not like, and there's episodes I do really like, but I'm a talent on it. I'm not, I'm not executive producing on it. So I don't have those choices. But in the end, I will say I'm happy where I stood in my position, using the science and the data, because that's actually what matters the most, is the science and the data. And people's testimonies obviously are data points, and they mean the most, because this wouldn't happen if we didn't have people experiencing it. How could we know what we're analyzing if we didn't know people were experiencing these things? So first and foremost, they're important, but then secondary is the data, to be able to look around it, because that's how we get media and we get other scientists and other people in the world that don't follow UFO topic interested in it, because they find stuff that they can actually measure. So I'm okay with that. And I will, and that's what I have to do from a journalist perspective. You have, from a media perspective, you have to look at data. You can't just always look at testimony. You can, but you need the data to support it, right?
Yeah, it's got to be a communion of both of them to
For sure,
really
yeah.
get
And
the
people make
answer. Yeah.
mistakes. We all do. The best thing about journalism is that my job is to talk to people and to report the data and findings. My opinion does not matter. And that's one thing. My opinion on the show really doesn't matter. It's the data and the testimonies make that actually matter. So when somebody reports something wrong, the best thing they can do is go back and re-report. That's the beauty of journalism, right? We're not perfect, but when you hold on to something and you won't let go because of your ego, if you've made a mistake, that's the problem. So, and as one UFO show, hopefully this will lead me to do more things within the space that that I can have a little bit more ownership on.
Oh yeah, you and I have been bouncing a show around for years now. It's gonna happen. I have no doubt. It's the best premise I could think of. So yeah, that's definitely to be continued. But okay, I got to ask you this before I let you go. Jesse on Patreon and I actually just read your article on NASA, this new controversy with NASA. And I'd love to get kind of your primary thoughts on where you stand on this. NASA is now being touted as an intelligence agency. What the hell is going on? Like, are they no longer space exploring or doing earth science? Now they're like another spy agency. What is happening, Chrissy?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So they're under Title 51, which is related to space agency. But if they move to Title 50, that is under counterintelligence. They haven't done that yet. So what this move is a labor move for some reason within President Trump. We'll see. Like, we'll obviously keep abreast of it and like watch what's going on. But right now it's a labor move, probably so they can consolidate labor, and also for them that people that are working at NASA might not be able to work with different labor boards. And that's a problem still on its own. So people were protesting in front of the White House saying like, this isn't right, because it's going down the wrong road. First of all, right? So we do have to watch it, because if it does move under Title 50, then it becomes not a public facing entity anymore. I believe it's still public facing because it's still under a space agency, but he's changing the title for the labor issues. But if it does move, then we're not public facing. We can't FOIA. There's many other issues that come, and then it's used for defense. Right. That's the other thing. We're using satellites to be able to monitor what's going on from different counterintelligence. So it becomes a huge issue. Doesn't mean that maybe hasn't been done already. I don't know. But from what we know, it is a public facing organization and agency. And if that changes how we get information. And it also changes how information is disseminated to us and through the media. And also it changes the whole tactics of what NASA is supposed to do. So we'll see. Right now it's just the start, right? But they haven't changed the title. They're still under Title 51.
Many people would argue they already are a non-transparent organization. I'm not on board with that quite yet, but I think they're still pretty public facing. But this would be, I think, a detriment in many ways for furthering our scientific endeavors. But you know what? Is what it is. Like you said, the story is just developing, but
and I think that they're gonna, there might be some things that NASA's done in the past that hasn't been the most upfront. Mike Gold, who was on the first UFO hearing, does speak about how NASA and everyone needs to be a little bit more upfront, right? He did kind of mention that. So I think that there probably has been past records and it hasn't been taken as seriously, or if they has, maybe NASA hasn't been the most upfront in the past. But I think in the most recent years, people that are working there are maybe not as privy to what happened in the past. So they wouldn't know. They're just going forward with mandates that they have now that are more transparent. That could be possible too, right? It all can kind of exist on its own. The question now is, what does NASA have that's records from the past that we don't know if they still have them? And moving forward, we have to watch that it doesn't change into like a full on spy agency, and it goes covert. Like that would just be.
We got enough of that. Yeah.
We don't need any, especially NASA. Like, let us keep NASA, please.
Just go to the moon again.
Everything we have, you don't take that away from us.
Yeah, I just want to see boots on the moon, please. I want to see what's been there since we last went.
Well, and missions are still going forward now. To date, like literally, when I wrote the end of the article, talks about how they were talking about what astronauts potentially will be going and what candidates will still be going to the moon. So like they're still actively doing things, but they're dealing with this in the background, which kind of sucks.
It does, like any other company, always stuff in the background. All right, last question. Max on Patreon asks, if you could sit down at dinner with one past or present UFO researcher, who would it be and what would you eat?
Oh.
Putting you on the spot.
Donald Kehoe.
Nice.
Yeah. Really? I actually I love Donald Kehoe.
Yeah.
I call him my UFO buddy. He's like, he's on our list to read actually for Project Book Club. I have not read his book yet, but I'm like, it's on my to-do list. But yeah, Donald Kehoe. Do you have it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, right here.
Nice.
Here we go. For anyone wondering, Donald Kehoe, the Flying Saucer Conspiracy. He is, I would say, one of the first whistleblowers ever when it comes to UFOs. He's incredible. Good choice.
Love his passion. Yeah. And I love the press conferences. I just love Donald Kehoe. I love how he's just like, he just keeps fighting and he's just always pushing back by himself, and you can see how hard he's trying to get this through and how he's had so many obstacles, it's just, I love Donald Kehoe.
A lot to thank him for. What would you eat at that dinner with him? Max wants to know.
Oh, probably some form of seafood or fish if he wasn't allergic to it. I love seafood and fish, like oysters, like mussels, maybe throw in some lobster.
Love it. That's
perfect. You go fancy.
I love that. Awesome, Chrissy. Well, I know you got to get going to another show. You're such a busy.
I have to do my show. I didn't. Oh, my internet issues. I haven't even been able to record my own show this week, so I got to do that today. Yeah.
Totally get it. Yeah, we're off to actually interview David Marler, so we will tell him you said hello. But let us know where we can find everything that you're up to. What do you got coming next for Rebelliously Curious and everything? Chrissy Newton.
For sure. I interviewed someone from Dobbs we're talking about life after death, reincarnation, the University of Virginia that has the Division of Perceptual Studies. That's what Dobbs stands for. So I have Marina, who is the assistant, oh my gosh, one of the assistant researchers. I'm forgetting her title. I'm sorry, Marina. But amazing academic that I met after I went to the Monroe Institute and had lunch with her and a couple of other people that have worked at Dobbs. So we speak about all the different findings and the work that they're working on at the University of Virginia from like an academic perspective of life after death. So it's exciting. And she was one of the award winners for the Bigelow contest about 5 years ago.
Oh, right.
Who's looking into life after death. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Marina is just a wealth of information. But if people want to watch that will come out in 2 weeks. They can go to my website is chrissynewton.com, but Twitter you can see is at Chrissy Newton. My Instagram is at being Chrissy Newton, or you can see all of my articles at thedebrief.org. But my podcast is Rebelliously Curious. So you can find that everywhere. YouTube, Spotify, and Apple.
Yep. Anywhere you get our show, you can find Rebelliously Curious. We'll have links in the show notes as well. Awesome. Suzanne, any last words for Chrissy?
Nothing but thank you. We appreciate your time. I know it's been a week.
Oh gosh, yeah, I know all of us, but it's good to see you guys. It's so good to see you.
You too.
So,
Chrissy, thank you for joining us once again on Somewhere in the Skies.
So enjoy and say hi to David Marler for me.
Bye.
Okay.
Somewhere in the Skies is part of the Somewhere podcast universe. Please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. To learn more about all of our shows, visit thespu.com.
Spectre Vision Radio.